Welcome to the all-new season of the Families Navigating Addiction and Recovery podcast. I'm Jeff Jones. This season, I'll be sharing honest conversations, practical insights, and meaningful discussions with amazing guests in the addiction, recovery, and family support field. We'll talk about the realities families face when addiction becomes part of their story. The fear, the strain on relationships, the uncertainty, the hope, and the small shifts that can begin to change how a family responds. As you listen along, I hope each episode gives you something to reflect on, something useful to take with you, and a little more support for the road ahead. Okay, so welcome to this episode of Families Navigating Addiction and Recovery. And this episode, I'm so excited to talk to a colleague, a friend, a woman that I actually met in person, not just online, but a little over a year ago at a conference, Feed Recovery Conference. Kristin Horstman. Kristin, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation. How are you today?
Yes. Hi, Jeff. I'm looking forward to it too. Thank you so much for having me on. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, great. Good. So I know Kristin mainly. One of the unique things that, at least I think, unique about Kristin is she is a gray area drinking coach. And in some ways that may be, oh, I know what that is, and there may be a whole lot of people, specifically families, who go, gray area drinking coach, I had no idea. I thought it was they were drinking or they were abstinent. What is this gray area
Mm.
drinking thing?
Yeah, great question. It's something that, yeah, a lot of the mainstream is still kind of wrapping their heads around. So it was actually put into the mainstream initially by Jolene Park. She had a TED Talk come out in 2017, and she called it gray area drinking. And she defines gray area drinking as basically this big, wide spectrum of drinking that's in between two smaller categories of drinking. So we've got something called a now and again drinker. That's somebody who drinks extremely rarely. That they go to a wedding, they toast the groom and bride. They're not getting drunk at this wedding. They're just kind of sipping on the champagne, and then they don't drink again for months. And then it's just not a big part of their life. It's barely a blip. It's not a part of their normal life. Very rare occurrence. But there is a an actual definition too, where we can actually there are some parameters. It is two or fewer, emphasis on fewer drinks per week. To me, I feel like that's still kind of a lot. But if you're
It
kind of like
is.
it is a lot. There's like 100 drinks per year. But if you're like sitting there white knuckling, waiting for that one drink every week, that's not a now and again drinker. I mean, it truly is, it's just much more rare drinking. The other end that's of drinking that's outside of this gray area is something we call the end stage or the rock bottom kind of drinking. And those individuals need a medical intervention to stop. They might be dealing with cirrhosis or the shutdown of other organs due to alcohol consumption. They cannot stop. They typically put themselves in an in or outpatient facility. So the now and again drinkers and the end stage drinkers, they're actually they're small little parts of the drinking population. What's in between is this big wide spectrum of the gray area. And any label that people like to label themselves as a drinker fits into this big gray area. So if you call yourself a moderate drinker, a social drinker, a dependent drinker, if you say alcoholic, if you say normie, if you say alcohol use disorder, and the varying
Yeah,
degrees of
yeah.
alcohol use, it's just they're all labels. They're all so vague, but so they just fit into this gray area spectrum. And she got the term actually from the medical literature. In 2010, the American Dietary Guidelines were up for review, and they actually were the alcohol calories were included in that review when they were looking at all the calories of consumption of Americans. And the study was about disease prevention and health optimization. And so at the end of that study, they actually coined this term of the gray area. So then when Jolene found it, she really, researched it, dug into it, and then created that TED Talk. And what I like about the gray area is that it really helps to take away a lot of shame and a lot of stigma. Because a lot of people, they don't want to be called like an alcoholic. That can
Yeah,
turn a lot of
right.
people off. And these different labels out there, they're a barrier to help. Because even if you call yourself a quote unquote normie, if you're a normie, you're drinking in the gray area and you might not be getting a DUI or something. But if you're drinking, a neurotoxin, which is what alcohol is, on a regular
Right.
basis,
Yes.
and we
Yeah.
and we know there's no safe amount, and that came out with the 2018 Lancet study. It's like if you're regularly drinking something that's not safe for you, it just means you're on the spectrum. It's not a moral judgment.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Kristen, I really like the incremental kind of scale and how you framed that it can be supportive for people who, maybe go to the internet and the question they can take a quiz, am I an alcoholic or not?
Right.
And the shame that comes with those labels. So I
Oh.
like the incremental, kind of part of it. And so this term may be new to people, and I'm just curious, can you say a little bit more about starting with someone? Like, what could families expect to if their loved one was gray area drinking? Because families,
Mm,
they may, just go, oh, they're an alcoholic or they're abstinent from being an alcoholic or something like that. So I'm
right.
just curious from a family perspective, how how is this best articulated, or are you brought into some of those conversations, or do you coach your
Mm.
clients on how to do that, or probably both, and I'm guessing?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's some characteristics around gray area drinkers. Gray area drinkers tend to take breaks. They take these voluntary breaks. So, in other words, they might be drinking for a while and then decide, you know what, I want to lose some weight. I'm going to do the whole 30 diet. And there's no drinking on the whole 30 diet. So then they take those 30 days off, eat clean, don't drink alcohol, but then they go right back to it. Or maybe they decide they want to train for a marathon or something like that. So, like, oh, I'm going to take the next 3 months off of drinking while I train for this marathon. But then they always go back to it. So it's just this big, wide spectrum where a gray area drinker. It's like if you're drinking more than 2 drinks per week, you're in the gray area. And then what I like to say is, if you're in that gray area, if some people think they have to wait for that rock bottom moment or wait for that alcoholic label. But for me, it's like if alcohol is in any way dimming your light, if it's in any way holding you back, your potential, if it just means like more hangovers, more groggy mornings, less productivity, less bounce in your step,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
if you keep turning to alcohol to regulate yourself, that's where a lot of trouble can come in. And again, it's a neurotoxin, it's a category 1 carcinogen. There's no safe amount.
right.
But it's not a judgment call. And but yeah, so it just depends. I mean, and then the spectrum, you've got kind of the lower end of the spectrum where, it may not really be truly creating big giant problems in your life. But then as you go down the heavier end of the spectrum, a lot of these problems are going to surface. It might mean more
Yeah,
arguments with your loved ones, for example, if alcohol is in the
right.
picture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a really good point, and I would say there's a very good chance for more arguments. And so one of the, I mean, I met you at this conference that Christina Vaslok put on. I assume that you did
Yes.
her level 1 training. Is that a fair assumption?
No, not yet, but I've been following her. Well, it was Jolene Park, my mentor, who introduced me to her, and she actually came into one of our coaching calls with the master coaches a couple of years back. And the reason why she brought her in is because we help as gray area drinking coaches. Once the alcohol comes out, we take a three-pronged approach. We want to replenish neurotransmitters. We want to rewire the stress response, and then we want to learn how to regulate. So basically, so with Christina Veselak comes in and her nutrition academy, because she's so focused on those neurotransmitters, and we know that the building blocks of neurotransmitters are amino acids. So with my clients who want to stop drinking, it's like the alcohol comes out, but now they're walking around with depleted neurotransmitters.
Right.
Alcohol is what we call a dirty drug. It wipes all of your neurotransmitters. And if your neurotransmitters are depleted, you're just not going to feel good. If your GABA is low, you're going to feel more anxious. If your serotonin is low, that's going to affect your mood. If your acetylcholine is low, that's going to affect memory, creativity, and focus. And if your dopamine is low, that's going to affect your motivation. So I work with my clients to help repair those neurotransmitters, those brain
Yeah.
chemicals,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to build them back up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so nutrition
I
is an important part of that.
Yeah, I got that, or you wouldn't be at that conference. And so I was going to ask, like, one, I want to say, take that training from Christina. Um, so one of the things
Yeah.
when I took that training that really caught me, one of the books we had to read was 7 Weeks to Sobriety by Joan
Yes.
Matthews Larson.
Yep.
And so in that book, it lists three different alcohol biotypes, and one that looks like alcoholism, but it's actually hypoglycemia. And
Mm.
so I I don't know how much you have read that book or know those different biotypes, but it's like her theory, and she took this information from, doctors' research back in the 50s and 60s, and she came up with, what was it? People who are born with like an additional alcohol dehydrogenase liver enzyme, and when they drink, their body
Mm.
processes alcohol incredibly efficiently. They don't get all that intoxicated. They don't have hangovers, at least for the first 10 years or something. And when they drink, their brain makes this tetrahydroquinolines, and they get euphoria. And so these people, they don't get a lot of the negative consequences. And it's like m- my experience with working with people who have like a majority of that alcohol biotype is that they're not even interested in things like gray area drinking, at least not for the first 10 years.
Mm.
And so my question, and without getting into all the detail about the alcohol biotypes, is from what I know, there are people whose genetic makeup, and I want to say to listeners, genetic makeup is at most 30 to 50% max. So it's not a do all end all, very, very super important. However, there are some people who can drink in the gray area, what used to be known as moderation. And there are other people, like, these people who are born with an additional alcohol dehydrogenase liver enzyme,
Mm.
who they can't. And so from the people that you have worked with, I guess I'm curious, about like, because I haven't heard too many people say, well, I just want to be a regular drinker. I just want to be a
Mm.
regular, like, I don't want to stop. I just want to be a regular drinker. And you're nodding your head, and you have heard this probably more than I have, quite frankly. And I'm wondering how you dance with that. And I love the fact that it isn't like you are an alcoholic, you just need to be abstinent, but you dance with that, metaphorically dance with that to support the person to actually try some things and then have some accountability and ongoing conversations. And if they're not able to do what they want to do, then you have some different conversations, I assume. So, can you talk about how you navigate that process?
Yeah. So basically, once people get to this point where they're drinking for years and years, and then once they start to stop, they realize how hard it is because of the
Yeah, yeah,
cravings piece. So, that's how I came about this work. I drank, I like to say I drank alcohol for about 20 years of my life. And I was in that gray area, moving up and down the spectrum, for I would say about 95% of that. But then in 2017, there was an uptick in my drinking because a lot of things were going on that were stressful, and I was having a hard time coping. And then in
yeah,
2018, my health really went off the rails, my liver enzymes, my pancreas, I had gastritis, like all of these severe problems started to show up. And then between 2018 and 2019, I couldn't stop. I truly, it was bare, I could barely get through a day. It was so hard. I was white knuckling every second, and I was so miserable. And I didn't want to stop at that point. I was like the party girl and the hostess with the
yeah,
mostest. And
right.
yeah, alcohol had just always just been in my life, and it was so normalized for me. So the idea of being like, you can't drink ever again, I was like, what? I was like, I'd rather die. And actually, I
Uh,
did get to that point
yeah,
because I
yeah,
got so depressed. And it was just kind of like people were just telling me back then, well, we'll just stop drinking. And I'm like, okay, but if I stop drinking, it's so painful and so miserable. And
yeah,
I feel awful all the time physically. And then I was feeling left out, of course. So then the FOMO was crushing my soul. I mean, there was just so much going on and
yeah,
nobody was
right,
explaining
right.
it to me. They're like, you just can't drink anymore. And I'm like, what? So I really went through this horrifically dark period for years. And it was really when I started to come across, finally at the end of 2019, I found Amy Grace's book, This Naked Mind. And
Yes.
she started to talk about the neuroscience of what alcohol, does to the brain. And that started to open up my eyes a little. I like to say that when I discovered some of this brain science around, around what alcohol does to the brain, it was like a turning point. Things started to click. And then I started to keep digging into that. And then I found Jolene's TED Talk. Not only does she
Yeah,
talk about
yeah,
gray area
yeah. I
drinking,
see.
she talks about the cravings piece. So then, about a little over a year after discovering all this cool information about the brain, then I finally, like I had started to string together a lot of days and weeks on my own without drinking. And then, but I realized that I needed, it was the cravings that were holding me back. And then Jolene was talking about these missing physiological, missing
Ah,
physiological
yeah,
pieces to address
right.
the cravings in the brain. So the problem is, so when clients come to me, I explain to them, that they want to stop drinking and they need help, right? And they want to learn how to
Yeah,
regulate their nervous system. So there's accountability around that. And I teach them, methodologies for that. So I teach them these concepts of noticing, and that came from Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's body, The Body Keeps the Score, where it's like, notice your body, notice cravings, notice your jaw clenching, notice your
yeah,
stomach is tight. And then once you notice those things, then you can start reaching for new tools. And we call them somatic tools. And soma means the body. So, you start reaching for a walk or some breath work or something like that. And then you keep doing that over and over and over again. And then you start to actually create new neural pathways in your brain
yeah,
so that
yes.
reaching for alcohol isn't
Oh,
so automatic. It's like, no, I'm going to reach for the walk. Like right now, it's almost like if I get really dysregulated, like my sneakers are on so fast and I'm out the door walking it off, whereas like I
yeah, yeah,
used I
yeah,
used to want to reach for alcohol.
yeah, yeah. So then what I'm hearing, Kristen, is part of how you help people navigate this is just slowly, incrementally bringing new information to them about what happens in their brain, what happens in their body, what happens from the standpoint of the depleted neurotransmitters and how that contributes to cravings they may have. So you listen to their story and then it sounds like you're curious then about the bionutritional healing and bring new information that they can use and potentially try.
Exactly. So information is very important, but it's really what's going to create the transformation is them actually taking action every single day. The
Right.
way to create those new neural pathways is to physically get up and take the walk, is to physically eat some protein, drink some water, do some
Yeah.
breath work, those kinds of things. So
S-
that's how that's really what's key, and that's why my coaching is so special because every single day they're creating those changes, and actually they have
Yeah.
an action step every single day to use those somatic tools, and then this way then the old pathways that led to alcohol, they start to
Right.
go. I like to say, like I frame it as they go dormant, they go quiet. Once you have a craving for alcohol and you've created those pathways in your brain, unfortunately that's permanent. But the exciting part is that you can let them go dormant. I like to say they grow weeds. Those roads are just, that got detour signs. You just don't go down them anymore. And
Yeah.
then you just start naturally we're like little construction workers, and we pave new roads in your brain so
Yeah.
that you want to go down
Yeah.
and reach for those healthy habits that are actually regulating for the nervous system, whereas obviously alcohol is not.
Yeah, what I just heard you say, I think that would be an important piece for family members to know what their loved one is doing. Like they are taking these action steps, and the more they do that, the more, and the language I've heard is the neural pruning, the more that old pathway gets pruned or just doesn't get used. Hence,
Right.
those cravings can go away. Plus, there's
Yeah.
like amino acids that can help those cravings, et cetera, et
Yes.
cetera.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
is
And honestly, oh sorry, just throw out one little thing because you're talking about the families
please.
and what they can do. Co-regulation is really an important part of the process too. Spending this positive time with loved ones where your nervous systems are co-regulating is really helpful. We're social creatures. We need to be around people. It's just part of, what makes us human, and we need it. It's like another nutrient. So, if family members, as they're trying to be supportive for the loved one who's struggling, if they can help support going for those walks with them, or come
Yeah,
up with other things to reach for, and then they can do it together, and it's only going to help the process.
yeah. So I think you just read my mind when you started talking about co-regulation because that's what I was thinking next is you know, Dr. Stephen Porges calming the nervous system and
Yeah.
the co-regulation piece, and I'm just kind of summarizing what I heard Kristen say. Family members, the more they can calm their nervous system and stay calm and turn their old reactions into a response. And I loved your idea, Kristen, to go for a walk with them and maintain their calm nervous system. That is what I hear Kristen saying with
Yes.
co-regulation. The calmest nervous system
Yes.
in the room wins
Yes,
on
exactly.
some level.
Exactly. And for me, because the year that was actually the most successful before I finally became sober was actually 2020. Because
Oh
in
gosh.
January, yeah, that was actually a helpful year for me. I'm grateful for the pandemic for that reason, because I was, so we just got our brand new puppy in January of 2020, which the timing was incredible. And then and so then, when shutdown happened, it was like, oh my God, wait, the homework is just to stay at home with my very loving, supportive,
Yeah,
very,
right.
very
Oh,
regulated husband and my sweet, adorable little puppy. I'm like, okay, I can do that. And I mean, it was so incredible because I started to actually like replenish and rewire my body in real time through the co-regulation, walking the dog more, getting all that sunlight. And yeah, so it really, like, who you spend time with matters for your nervous system.
yeah. And I know when I met you over a year ago, and we talked about the nervous system a very little bit. And when I heard you say that, I was like a breath of fresh air. And, because traditional addiction recovery, for whatever reason, does not say anything about the nervous system, and that
Right.
has been frustrating. So to see and meet another professional who has incorporated nervous system regulation into the work they do, thank you very much. Seriously, that is
Thank
such a big
you.
deal. And for families, the suggestion that Kristen had a few minutes ago about going for a walk with them, I really want to emphasize that. And for family members who have done anything with me, this is an opportunity for new conversations. And there's more than one new conversation that can be had. And it's like the walking, the movement helps to stay calm, to stay regulated. Yeah,
Yep,
thank you very much
totally.
for
Yeah.
bringing that up. And then so the other and so some of my background is with how a calm nervous system is needed. And so I'll go into the family piece a little bit. Families can't set boundaries with an activated nervous system. And if you do, it isn't going to be a boundary, it's going to be a threat, and you're not going to have a
Yes.
consequence. So just um, so one of the things I love about the calm nervous system is a majority of the blood flow goes to the cortex, the part of the brain that can make the best decision. And when we're activated, and I know you know this, Kristen, you're shaking your
Yep.
head, the majority blood flow goes to the fire alarm part of the brain, the amygdala, and
Right.
and then we get caught into arguments and
Yeah.
et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. So,
Yeah. I have this great little story that demonstrates this. I remember about 2.5 years into my sobriety slash nervous system journey, I walked into the living room and my husband was sitting on the couch, and immediately my nervous system was like reading him, and it was picking up on the fact that he wasn't his normal regulated self, that he was a little dysregulated. But I approached him anyway and I said something. And it was one of those moments where when the words come out of your mouth and you go, oh no. And you're like, oh, I've just put my foot in my mouth and I said the wrong thing. And then so I like to say, do you know the Flip the Lid model by Dr. Dan
no, tell
Siegel?
me.
Oh my
No,
God. Okay.
tell
This
me.
is a perfect story for that. So Dr. Dan Siegel, he's got this great model of the brain. And it's like, I always have people like literally hold their hand up and look at it. It's like, oh my God, look, your fit, like your fist, it looks like a brain. So you've
Yeah.
got, the wrist down here is like your brain stem, your automatic bodily
Yes,
functions.
yes.
And then the thumb over the palm, this is like our whole amygdala and our emotional limbic brain. And then up here, the four fingers on top is the upstairs brain or the prefrontal cortex. So
Okay.
when the prefrontal cortex, when the fist is closed over the thumb like that, it's like everything is connected, and the logical brain and the animal brain, they're all connected, they're all in communication. But when we get frustrated, when we get dysregulated, we say our lid flips, and then all of a
Right. Yeah.
sudden it's like our fingers go up in the air, and then our logical brain, I like to frame it as like the logical brain leaves the building, and now you're just working
Okay.
with that animal brain that was firing and firing and firing and firing and flipped those fingers up.
Yeah.
So I remember like this vivid moment where I said, I walked in. He was like a little bit dysregulated. Maybe not all four fingers were up. Maybe like two were up. And then I said whatever I said, and then all of a sudden his animal brain totally flipped, fired so hard that it flipped his hands up, and then he went in, that prefrontal cortex left the building, and he was in full dysregulation mode. And then as a
Yes.
result, because of the co-regulation mechanism that we have, my lid got flipped. So,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
but I noticed it. I noticed it was happening in real time. And so I was like, oh, danger, danger, danger. This is not a good time to talk, because right now it's just going to be two animal brains arguing. And what's the point of
Yeah.
that? The
Oh,
logical, the
beautiful.
animal brain, the emotional brain can't reason. So it's like, why would you even want to waste time with that? So I literally like bolted from the room. And the funny thing is, too, I slammed the door on my way out, but I noticed that the second I did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that wasn't very nice, Kristin. So then I went back in the room and I was like, listen, honey, I'm sorry for slamming the door. I'm going to go outside and get regulated for a little while, and I'll come back and we'll talk later. And it was like, I love that story because it was such a simple moment, but it's something that happens,
Yeah.
right, day to day.
That's
Like, and yeah, if you can notice that dysregulation is happening in real time. And of course, I was able to notice because I had been practicing my
yeah.
skills for years leading up to that point, and I was sober.
And how long had you been sober when that story happened? And by the way, that was such a relatable story. That it was super. And when I tell stories like that, it is generally not the person in early recovery that catches themselves. But so
Right.
how,
I was like
how
2.5 years, that
oh,
specific moment. Yeah.
okay, okay, that makes sense. I love that story, and when I tell
Thanks.
that story, it is s something like you, the family member, are the one without the addiction, without the impaired brain. You have the best chances of catching the fact that you're activated and that you can step out of the room or take a pause
Exactly.
and in that pause you know you that big breath, the parasympathetic kicks in, and then
Right.
you can
And then you
calm.
can
But you did that. But
respond.
you did that, and I'm going, that's brilliant. So when I hear that, this is just a wonderful story of, that it's a reciprocal relationship. It's both people's
Yes.
responsibility to do their best to maintain calm and to acknowledge the fact that they're not going to be perfect all the time. They're
Right.
human.
Right. I like to emphasize that point all the time. I'm always saying, listen, we're all human, having a human experience. Just because
Yeah,
I stopped drinking and I know how to regulate my nervous system, it doesn't mean I'm not going to get dysregulated. I'm going to get dysregulated for the rest of my life.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's just how it goes. So, but the trick is, can you notice it and can you reach for a response instead of a reaction?
Well, and so one last piece about that story that I really like is when you slam the door and you notice that
Yep.
you opened the door and did a quick little repair.
Yep.
And so for people who are listening to this, a repair is, it can be as simple as what Kristen did. It's acknowledging your end of the relationship and that you're not perfect, because no one's
Exactly.
perfect. The other thing, and I, the addiction in the family kind of thing, I can't tell you, it's almost 100%. I don't have statistics, but that is, perfectionism is a thing with families that have addiction.
Mhm.
And the fact that you can own and take responsibility, like Kristen's story, is awesome. And yeah, I wonder
Yep.
if you could have done that with like 3 months sober. or something. I don't know. But
I
awesome
think I
story,
think I
Kristin.
thank you. I think I could have only because like I had been, working with the coach and doing that work every single day. I just like and that's really the difference. It was like that daily accountability of thinking and not only thinking about these skills, but actively using them every single day. But of course, yeah, with time, it gets better and better and better and better. Would I have been as quicker to notice in 3 months versus 2.5 years? Probably not. But I still 3 months was at least enough that I had been building those skills, and I had started to become the kind of person that was responding to life instead of reacting.
So I said that was going to be my last comment about that story, and I just want to go on and
No,
on
let's
and
keep
on and
going.
on, because oftentimes when I tell stories like this, I say that it can be the person who's still in addiction or going in and out of using, and when their nervous system gets activated, their number one go-to strategy is going to be go back to that alcohol to
Right.
regulate their nervous system. And the family member, their nervous system gets activated, and their number one strategy is, here, let me help you and save you from what I
Mm,
think is dangerous,
right.
drinking. So that reciprocal relationship can oftentimes play out in I'll just say a not so optimal way, and then it can also play out in a awesome way. And that story in my mind is a keeper.
Thanks. I love it.
Yeah,
I know I reference it a lot too because it's so illustrative and relatable, like you said.
yeah, yeah. Wow. So then is there, from this conversation, and I didn't know that we would go where we went, and we would make so many helpful points for individuals who are either drinking or in navigating that somewhere, and their families. But this co-regulation piece is super huge, and everyone has a responsibility in managing their own nervous system, which
Exactly.
is beautiful. And my and Kristin and I overlap in the um, bionutritional approach to, in my language, enable health within the body. But
Mm,
it's the bionutritional approach to support the ability to co-regulate. Wow. So from
yeah.
where we're at in this conversation, is there anything else that you want to say, oh, we have to talk about this or this, or where do we go from here, Kristin?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, on a personal note, I have something really exciting that just happened. I actually just released my own podcast
Ah,
around
awesome.
all these topics. So, yeah, if people want to dig further into the nervous system and learn about the brain and a little bit of alcohol education as well, I created a podcast that I call Sunsets of the New Happy Hour. Because now, at this point now, I stopped drinking 5.5 years ago. So 5.5 years ago, I started chasing sunsets instead of my next cocktail, and it led me down the path of the healthiest, happiest version of me.
That's wonderful. And I'm guessing part of what you do for your clients is help them find support them down their path of the healthiest version for them,
Exactly.
whether it's
Exactly.
sunsets or ocean waves or climbing mountains or whatever it is.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it. And do you want to say a little bit more about how people can learn more about you, connect with you, whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. I have a website, KristinHorstman.com, just my first and last name spelled out. I just released a Substack. That's really exciting. So that's new. I just moved my newsletter platform to that. And I know you're on there, and you and I have a lot of fun sharing our posts back and forth and having conversations. So that's a great place for me to share things about the podcast, and then just all things related to all the work I do with just communities that are alcohol free. I work with an organization called Zero Proof Experiences. They create these amazing events called Sober in the City, and they create these like destination travel events, and it's just like these 4-day weekends of nonstop fun and celebrating life without alcohol. And then that same company has an online community that is a supportive community, but it's not a recovery community like in the traditional sense. It's much more forward thinking. Our tagline is "We're alcohol free, now what?" So I love that
Oh, I
community
love
of
that.
women. Yeah, yeah. So a
Now
lot of the
what?
Right? It's like, okay, all right, alcohol's gone. Okay, now what? Like how are we moving
Yeah.
forward in our lives? And what kind of NA beverages are we enjoying? And those kinds of things. So and I talk a lot about the same. So I'm a facilitator for that online group, which has been such an honor this past year and a half of doing that. And I get to bring these really cool, fun nervous system topics to that group as well. So if anybody would like to check out that group, they can message me and I can invite them for free as a facilitator. Yeah, that group's a lot of fun, and it's so supportive, and yeah, I love it so much. So I love to talk about them. And yeah, and then the podcast, Sunsets of the New Happy Hour, you can find it on YouTube, and then of course, as well as any platforms that you like to listen to podcasts on. And yeah,
All right, Kristin, thank you very much.
thank you so much for having me, Jeff.
Thank you for spending this time with me on the Families Navigating Addiction and Recovery podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you something to pause with, maybe a new way to understand what is happening in your family, or a small shift you can carry into your next conversation with the person you love. If this episode brought someone to mind, I invite you to share it with them. Sometimes one conversation, one idea, or one different way of seeing things can open the door to change. You can also learn more about my book, Rethinking Addiction, The New Family Recovery Solution. In the book, I share a different way for families to think about addiction, communicate with more clarity, and create family rules that are stronger than addiction's chaos. All the details are in the show notes. You can also visit thefamilyrecoverysolution.com for resources, guidance, and next steps for families impacted by addiction. Thank you again for listening. I look forward to being with you in the next episode.